The Honda S2000 is one of the most over-romanticized cars ever made. Well-respected and well-made vehicle. Some people would say that the AP1 is the real S2000, more raw, able to hit up to like 9,000 RPM. The AP1 was a rough draft, and the AP2 was the more refined. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the specs. We're going to be talking about how the car was made and why is the AP1 and AP2 different. By the end of this video, you should be getting a good understanding about the AP1 and the AP2. And also, I'll be giving you my opinion on whether or not you should get an AP1 or an AP2. But also, I'll give you my thoughts on what you could do to make your AP1 better so you can get the best of both worlds. The AP1 came with a production run from 1999 to 2003 with a 2.0 F20C engine with a horsepower of 240 horsepower with a red line of 9,000 RPM. The AP2 ran from 2004 to 2009 with a 2.2 liter engine, the F22 C1, had an output of 237 horsepower with a lower rev limit of 8,200 RPM. So why does the Honda S2000 feel different? At launch, the Honda S2000 at the time had held the record for the most horsepower per liter until it was beaten by the Ferrari 458. So here's a few things as to why the Honda S2000 feels different from your other Hondas. Suspension and chassis came with double wishbone suspension front and rear, multiple ball joints per corner, rigid X-bone frame design, near 50-50 weight distribution, engine mounted behind the front axle. And before somebody says, yes, the Honda S2000 is a rear-wheel drive Honda. Unlike the majority, there's only a very few Hondas that come rear-wheel drive, being the Honda S2000 and NSX. However, for some of you people that don't understand, behind the front axle, meaning that the engine was placed behind the suspension shock towers. So where your suspension is bolted up, the engine was essentially placed behind that. Why does this matter? Tire stays flatter under load, predictable camber changes, insane steering feedback, no torque steer. However, you are subject to oversteer, but nonetheless, you won't be getting the torque steer like you would get with a front-wheel drive vehicle. This is going to be more or less a club racer. As for one of the trims of the Honda S2000, the highest version that I've seen is the S2000 CR. So let's talk about the AP1 S2000 from 1999 to 2003 as what I would like to call the raw version, with the F20C shorter stroke, loves high revs, loves high RPM, weak torque below 6,000 RPM, suspension and handling, aggressive rear toe geometry, softer rear bushings, snappy oversteer at limit. So what are the pros of this vehicle? 9,000 RPM limit gives you a very unmatched experience, has a lightweight feel to it. Despite being a convertible, usually convertibles carry a considerable amount of weight, but being the fact that it was made by Honda, I do not doubt that this is going to be a convertible lighter than most. Raw steering response, and you have the option of sticking with the soft top, or if you can somehow find it and afford it, you can find yourself a hard top for as much as you're going to be paying an arm and a leg for a car that you're probably already paid an arm and leg for. Not that that's a bad thing. If that's the car that you want, go ahead. I have no problem with you doing that. However, but if you go ahead and you see somebody selling a hardtop for $600 and it has a bunch of scratches or whatever have you in it, as long as it's able to be repaired, buff, shined, or whatever have you, take that hardtop, because you're going to be out there looking for a long time because no one is willing to go ahead and sell it to you for less than 4 digits. I'm just saying, the last time I saw one was at least $3,000. I don't know what you want from me. I can tell you from what I'm seeing, people are taxing. For all I know, the S2000 is probably cheap where you're at. But all I can say is this: if you find it, it's a deal, please. All I know is where I live at, rich people, big bags, deep pockets out here. So what are the cons? Unforgiving handling for beginners. I remember that there was a video of a guy who allowed somebody to drive his Honda S2000, and that kid ended up crashing it. And it became a huge mess. So I would say, yeah, for beginners, I don't believe that's a car for beginners. And I would believe no one would actually think it would be a good idea to allow some rando kid to go ahead and drive their Honda S2000. Best believe the only way you would get me to allow some kid to drive my Honda S2000 better be Make-A-Wish. And that's a stretch. But that is probably the only reason. It had to have been a Make-A-Wish. And I just so happened to say, you know what, fine. Other than that, couldn't be me. Very little low end torque. Cars like this tend to have very little torque when down at the bottom, especially when they rev very high. Earlier years were known for snap oversteer, which is understandable. As is most cars when they've just coming out, will always have bugs. It's like a phone. You go ahead and you buy a phone and it just dropped a couple months ago. Me personally, I'd rather wait till things get their updates in before saying I'm gonna, cash in, gonna go ahead and buy something. So really, it's in everything that you buy. So it's gonna be the same thing for anything that comes out recently. And this was no different for a Honda S2000. The Honda S2000 was definitely a driver's car. Not only did this car cost more, even in its used state, you had to make sure that you understand what you were doing. You understood its mechanics, but you also knew how to handle it when behind the wheel. When Honda made this car, they knew what they were doing, they knew what they were going to put into it, how to execute it, what the demographic was going to be, and the people that they were selling it to, they were either one of two things. Either one, there were people that thought that it was going to be like another Civic, or two, they were going to have this car for a very long time. They knew the mechanics of the car and they knew how to own it, drive it, and take care of it. And that's my belief. But hey, if you guys out there have an S2000, I'd like to go ahead and tell me, what do you think about the S2000? If you have an AP1 or an AP2, go ahead and drop your comments down below. I'd like to hear from you guys. Moving on to the AP2 from 2004 to 2009, the more refined version of the S2000 with the 2.2 liter F22 C1. The engine has a longer stroke, more mid-range torque, lower redline, but still has the same essence and character. Suspension changes. Changes to the suspension. So with the AP2, there were changes to the suspension, which include revised rear toe geometry, stiffer bushings, larger rear wheels, and tires. So on to the pros and cons. The pros, better daily usability. The pros aren't really too much into the AP2. It is a little bit more refined. There isn't really that many more pros for the AP2 that we haven't already covered in AP1. However, we do get a different drivetrain, or a bigger engine specifically. We get more torque and we get a revised suspension. So there's that too. In the cons, it is said that it is a lot less wilder than the AP1, doesn't have the high rev range, but though we will go ahead and talk about that in a little bit. Some people will say that it makes it usable. Well, it depends on your point of view and whether or not you feel the same. Go ahead and let me know what you think. Do you think that the AP2 was a step back in the wrong direction, or do you think that it is better and more usable than an AP1? Let me know. Go ahead and drop your comment down below. So which one should you buy? With the AP1, obviously you get the high rev range and you could just scream it out to 9,000 RPM, or you can get the AP2, which has a shorter rev range, but you can also get more mid-range torque. In my opinion, I, for one, am a high revving engine fan. So obviously for me, it's going to be the AP1. But what can be done to fix some of the cons that the AP1 has? Now, with the AP1, obviously from 1999 to 2003, all of them, most of them, they're all, used. But we're going to be focusing more on you guys finding a used one. Looking for a used S2000, I would say the first thing you need to think about is whether or not the engine has been over revved. Because usually when it comes to over revving at S2000, the one thing you're going to come across is cracked intake valves. When it comes to replacing these, take the retainers from the AP2. From my research, that this seems to be a fix for this issue. It seems that the AP2 retainers are a lot better than AP1s. Plus, if you're going to go ahead and do some maintenance on this car, say that you buy one, maybe the retainers aren't even bad. But, preventative maintenance is always a good thing, especially when you buy a car when you don't really know the full scope of its previous ownership. So when it comes to the differential for an S2000, if you have an AP1, it's better to switch that differential from an AP1 to an AP2, being that the AP2 has a much more beefier housing. The final drive ratios are similar. The AP2 divs have stronger prop shaft bolts, but doing this will require a flange swap if you're going to be doing this type of change. Well, guys, we reached the end of the video. Whether you get an AP1 or an AP2, I believe that the car is enjoyable nonetheless. However, if you love the scream of a high revving engine that goes all the way up to 9,000 RPM, I will say this: get an S2000 AP1. But if you don't really care too much about that and you just like a cruiser, like a little convertible running around time, and you just like VTEC, not really too caring about how high it goes, AP2 is there for you. All right, guys. Thank you guys for watching another video. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and check out my other videos. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you guys in the next one. I'm out. Peace.